Hey everyone, we are live on this Thursday. Welcome to Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
Boy, do we have a boatload of news to go through. And we just had a Supreme Court decision just a few minutes ago on Arizona.
The Supreme Court has ruled that Arizona can require proof of citizenship to register to vote.
Imagine that.
That means that any other state that wants to put such a law in place will now be able to, since the Supreme Court has upheld this as a constitutional law.
Yeah, we had a number of delegates who gave the middle finger to Kamala Harris, saying they're going to, last night, California votes, a number of states voted. Minnesota basically said, we're passing, we're not going to vote for Kamala Harris. This is at the DNC. They said, no, we're going to pass. We're going to just abstain. We're not going to vote for her, which is kind of stunning.
They voted present, so it is kind of like a silent protest. Also, we're getting word that the RFK Jr. candidacy is in turmoil. The plan was to have a major announcement tomorrow on Friday, and they were expected to endorse Donald Trump. Now they're saying that there's internal strife, some reports inside that campaign. They may either drop out altogether, they may keep going, they may actually endorse Donald Trump. Who knows at this point? But definitely we've been covering how they've been tortured, sabotaged, and thwarted at every turn by the DNC. That seems to be true. So. Who knows?
We'll see. Yeah, we're going to be watching on the RFK side, and then also we get huge news on the Trump assassin side of things too. Thomas Crooks, as many people pointing out in the chat right now, he was a total patsy, and don't fall for it, guys. It was an inside job. So who was Thomas Crooks talking to? We now have new information about his encrypted messages and encrypted messaging platforms that he was using, plus new video and some stunning revelations from a member of Congress on the Trump assassin. So we're going to talk about that.
Plus a new study, shocking new study, shocking but not shocking, that the government is admitting that fluoride does lower IQ. Now, we brought you a story last year where the government has known this for years but suppressed this information. So now we're at least getting it in a more official capacity. Want to talk about Canada?
Yeah, and then we're going to also talk about Canada because the Trudeau government is arresting individuals for social media posts. Stop me if you've heard this before, like in the UK and other places, the tyrannical Trudeau government. And we're also going to have an update on the trucker convoy trial, which has been going on. I mean, so many different pieces of news that we're getting to today, including communism.
Right. So we have a first-time guest coming up, Jack Posobiec. You may know him because he is a popular conservative voice on Twitter and X, whatever you want to call it. A very important anti-war voice as well. And he's going to talk about his new book about communism. And boy, is that the word of the week because of all the communist policies that Kamala Harris has come out endorsed with a straight face.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about how this is no longer a creeper idea. It is here. We're here right now. And so I'm excited to have his presence on the show. First-time guest.
DD in the chat says, Comrade Kamala.
Right.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of liberal voices are saying, shut up, that's the Trump talking point. That's not a thing, without being willing to do the study and look at the nuance of what kind of society we are emulating right now. Yeah.
So we got a lot of news to get to today, so we're going to get into it. I want to deep dive this fluoride story in a moment because it's actually shocking. So before we get there, though, right now we're watching Jackson Hole. We're watching what the Federal Reserve is about to do with interest rates because we got these revised jobs numbers yesterday, which shows the Biden administration has been lying to us about the labor market and how many jobs have actually been lost under the Biden administration and replaced with government jobs and illegal immigrants. And so was Jerome Powell lying to us a few weeks ago when he said that, in fact, the labor market was strong? So we're going to see these rate cuts likely coming here in September, just ahead of the election, which means, of course, that precious metals will start rising. And I want to talk to you today about using your IRA, making sure you have a self-directed IRA. This is something you control. This is not something that Wall Street controls. And our friends over at Lear Capital can actually help you get your IRA set up. Very, very simply. It's so easy to do. A self-directed IRA that you can then invest in stocks if you want. You can invest in gold, silver, precious metals. It doesn't matter. You can invest in real estate with a self-directed IRA. And there's a reason that Wall Street doesn't promote it or talk about it is because they don't make money off of it. You control it. We have a self-directed IRA. All of our children, we made sure they had a self-directed IRA from very little, from when they were very, very tiny. This is a very powerful tool. And many of you might even have like an old 401k or an old IRA that's just been sitting around. after you left a previous job and you didn't know what to do with it, you can roll that over into a self-directed IRA and actually start investing in precious metals, gold, silver, nearing all-time highs once again. I talked to a friend of the show, Kevin Demerit, the other day, who said, he believes that silver should be upwards of like $45 to even $50 right now. So very, very cheap for silver. Anyway, they can help you get set up with an IRA. Just go to call their 800 number, and they'll help you get this IRA guide and walk you through that process. 1-800-613-3557 for your free guide, or go to LearRedacted.com. That's 1-800-613-3557, or go to LearRedacted.com. Well, Bombshell New Details Revealed around Trump's assassin, would-be assassin, Thomas Matthew Crooks. Trump's would-be assassin, did he work for NATO? Did he have some sort of connections with NATO? This is being thrown around. And of course, that's on the speculation side. But why? Why would people be questioning that all of a sudden? Well, because thanks to the New York Post last night, and this bombshell report, Trump's shooter Thomas Crooks had encrypted messaging accounts in Belgium, Germany, and New Zealand. I'm just going to read directly from this piece, if you don't mind. So Trump rally gunman Thomas Matthew Crooks used encrypted messaging accounts on various platforms, located in Belgium, New Zealand, and Germany, according to a member of the congressional task force investigating his assassination attempt against former President Trump. Representative Michael Walz of Florida, who is an Army Special Forces veteran, and he's one of 13 lawmakers right now who's on this task force, on this bipartisan task force looking into this. He told reporters that he thinks that these overseas accounts show that, in fact, he was not acting alone. I mean, this is what? You have a sitting member of Congress saying that he believes that this has raised his suspicion that he likely wasn't acting alone, and certainly immediately regarding the shooter's movements, saying that these overseas accounts piqued his suspicion immediately regarding the shooter's motives. Who was he talking to? Quoting him now, why does a 19-year-old kid who's a healthcare aide need encrypted platforms not even based in the United States but based abroad, where most terrorist organizations know it's harder for our law enforcement to get into, asked Walz.
Now, Clayton, you have been a 19-year-old boy in Pennsylvania. How many encrypted overseas accounts, or how many people did you communicate when you were 19 and politically interested that were in other countries such as these?
To me, as a 19-year-old kid in Pennsylvania, yes, I grew up outside of Philadelphia. To me, Europe seemed like Mars.
Right.
Like none of my friends had like a connection to Belgium,
right?
or New Zealand, or Germany, or NATO. I mean, no, that was
bloodlines, or the German club, or things like that, or foreign exchange students. Maybe one out of a whole school would go.
Now, granted, I graduated high school in 1995, so we didn't have, I had bulletin board systems where my friends and I would log in and play video games,
sure,
like on our bulletin board, but it was all text based. You'd log in and make your move, and then like a day later you'd log in again. And a dial-up modem. Now, of course, you've got cell phones and all of these things. But how is a 19-year-old kid? Why would he need these?
This is highly irregular. I think we can agree.
And we also know that Crooks was shooting guns at the same training ground as the Department of Homeland Security. So that's curious. So why would he be talking? Why would he have encrypted apps that are located in, at the heart of NATO? And why would he be training at the same gun training center as Department of Homeland Security? It's all very interesting. Mike Benz.
I mean, this guy really did not want to go incognito at all. Right? Walking around with ladders and training where law enforcement was. Right.
Being out in broad daylight. So there was no incognito in this. He was like the anti-Batman.
Yes.
He was like daylight Batman. So here's Mike Benz, cybersecurity expert, says kind of weird. A 20-year-old kid in Pennsylvania shooting guns at the same gun range used by DHS agents had an encrypted messaging account in Belgium, where NATO is headquartered. Kind of weird, Mike Benz says. Congressman Walz says the evidence has led him to believe that Crooks didn't act alone. I mean, what? sitting member of Congress, says the evidence that he's looked at on this task force says that he believes that Crooks didn't act alone.
Well, okay, this is Representative Michael Waltz. From Florida, not Walz, the Democratic vice
Tim
president.
Walz from
he
Minnesota.
does not seem to care very much.
No,
they are very incurious, the Democratic Party, about this.
There's no way a 20-year-old kid has a detonator, 3 bombs, he said, encrypted messaging platforms, based abroad, seen walking around for more than an hour beforehand and totally ignored, according to Congressman Walz. So Crooks, here he is. So this new video released over the past 48 hours shows Crooks at 4:26 p.m. before the assassination attempt. You can see him here just lollygagging around. And as friend of the show, Dan Bongino, pointed out, where was the CSU, the counter surveillance unit, with this? For an hour beforehand, like, they are trained to study these types of individuals who are sort of by themselves. They look totally out of place. This guy, more than anything, looks totally out of place.
Well, why do you say that?
Compared to the vendors and the other individuals that are there ahead of time setting up.
I don't know. This walk in and of itself does not raise suspicion.
Well, okay, but that's just one little snippet. And the only reason we have this video is because one of the vendors was there early setting up.
Right.
And so he was just sort of panning with his camera, and he realized later that he had this on his camera.
You don't know that this guy doesn't, have a local bee shop and is just walking back to the truck for something.
A local bee shop. Maybe. Okay. I'm just saying.
The fact that
I'm not a counter surveillance operative.
Though, I mean, think about how much they track us. That he has been in shooter training with DHS and in very suspicious. Yes. Then that should have raised the flags that, that person who's been doing that is here and walking around alone and raising flags.
So more than all of this is what happened to his body. What happened to Crooks's body? Why did the FBI burn his body? Why did they cremate his body? The FBI secretly released would-be Trump assassin Thomas Crooks' body to be cremated before Representative Clay Higgins could examine it. According to a preliminary investigative report that's been released, the FBI cremated his body without telling anyone 10 days after the PA rally tragedy. So they took his body, and Clay Higgins. This is from Clay Higgins. My effort to examine Crooks' body on Monday, August 5th caused quite a stir and revealed a disturbing fact. The FBI released the body for cremation 10 days after July 13th. On July 23rd, Crooks was gone. Nobody knew this until Monday, August 5th, including the county coroner, law enforcement, sheriff, etc. Yes, Butler County coroner technically had legal authority over the body, but I spoke with the coroner, and he would never have released Crooks' body to the family for a cremation or burial without specific permission from the FBI.
What?
What are you trying to hide? What are you trying to hide? You don't want us to know how he was killed, exactly what rounds took him out?
From which direction?
Which direction? What as part of the autopsy? I mean, it's unbelievable. And now we know from Real Clear Politics overnight, according to Susan Crabtree, Secret Service agents placed on leave after the Trump assassination attempt. So now and this is unbelievable because 3 weeks ago, according to Real Clear Politics, remember acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe was pushing back on this. Remember, he was like, we are not going to just randomly, place people on leave and all of this sort of stuff. And now they're on leave. Why are these individuals not fired? Why are they're just placed on administrative leave? That's like free vacation during August when everyone else is off enjoying their vacations. They get administrative leave? Administrative leave occurs when a federal employee temporarily leaves their position and work duties, either because of misconduct investigation, medical or mental health issues. They still receive pay and benefits. But those decisions, of course, are left to the agency leadership. So there seems to be this like back and forth now between the Pittsburgh, like the Butler Police Department, of course, and the Secret Service, and them throwing them back under the bus. But encrypted messaging platform in Belgium, whereas Mike Benz points out, it's very interesting that NATO is centered there. On top of that, you have all of these pieces of equipment that are found on his body from Representative Waltz, who's saying 3 bombs, detonators. Who was he working with? He now believes he was not acting alone. He's on the task force investigating this. And you have the FBI authorizing a cremation of his body, going around the investigation in order to cremate his body. To do what? To hide what? Be very interesting. Let us know what you think about this.
Yes, that is very damning. And I would like to know what his parents authorized. What did his family authorize?
Right.
Those are very strange data points.
Will we see any sort of autopsy examination? No, apparently not. We're not going to get to see that. Right. And I guess the task force also is not going to.
And when it comes to the JFK assassination, those were really important points. What direction did the bullet enter? Where did it come from? What was the trajectory? I guess we're not going to get that.
Calvin Johnstone in our chat says, and redacted, where was his body? Who took it? Where were the cameras? There was cameras all around there. Yeah, exactly. Who removed his body? How did they get it off the roof? Why don't we see that footage? We have the body cam footage. Who took it? Where did it go? Was it sitting in the county coroner's office for those 10 days before it was authorized to be cremated? Who did that?
Yeah.
It's stunning. I mean, but not really surprising at all. There are those, and I just want to be careful here because there are those kind of throwing around the idea that there's this Iranian plot, right? And I've been very cautious. I believe that is my personal humble opinion, that is a false flag. The idea that you're going to use Iran to get us into a large war, and using this, Roger Stone has been very outspoken against this, saying, don't believe it. Don't believe it. They're going to try to pin sort of a catalyst for World War III on Iran. They're trying to do it, so don't fall for it. And as people in our chat are pointing out, it was an inside job inside the United States government. Let us know your thoughts on this, but it's deeply troubling. All right, we got more news to get to.
That's right. We're going to talk about this bombshell new report about how fluoride does, in fact, lower the IQ, but has been pressed on all of us who live inside the United States. That's great. We have no options here, at least not when it comes to municipal water. We're also going to talk about Canada arresting people over social media because they're a UK wannabe, I guess. And we're going to talk about communism. First-time guest Jack Posobiec is going to join us and tell us about his new book and all the warning signs about a communist revolution that are here right now in the United States. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at American Financing because interest rates are teetering on the brink of perhaps dropping. So right now is the perfect time to call and think about refinancing your home and possibly using the equity that you've got in your home in order to pay off some of your high interest debts. Now, this is what wealthy people do all the time, is they leverage bad debt for good debt. They don't think, oh, I've got this asset, I better not touch it. Absolutely not. What they do is look into the assets that they've got and say, can I use some of that in order to build wealth instead of just live on the treadmill that is the daily life of finances. They can teach you how to do this. And in fact, again, this is what most wealthy people already know. You can call them at 866-890-8434, and they'll teach you and look through what you've got, your finances, and help you come up with a plan to make it so that there's not, you know, the saying, too much month at the end of the money. So you can either call them or go to americanfinancing.net/redacted. They are saving their customers an average of $800 a month. Think of how much you could free up with $800 a month in your family finances. So either give them a call or head on over to americanfinancing.net/redacted.
Well, a bombshell new report about the fluoride in our drinking water is out, and it confirms what we've been reporting here on this show for over a year, that fluoride is, of course, highly toxic. It's lowering the IQ of our children if they drink it or use it. Take a look. This is from the Associated Press. U.S. government report says fluoride at twice the recommended limit is linked to lower IQ in kids, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So independent journalist Derek Brose has been covering the massive problems with fluoride and this lawsuit between the EPA and the Fluoride Action Network in a California courtroom. And so he is well versed on the horrors of fluoride. And we wanted to welcome Derek back to comment on this latest report overnight. Derek, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back on, Clayton. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And, you know, I think the first time you were on well over a year ago or so, it blew my mind. I mean, it blew my mind, it blew Natalie's mind, and I think our audience was shocked by what you were reporting as it relates to fluoride. And of course, you were covering this lawsuit at this time in the California courtroom, and now we have this new report. So first of all, just your response to this new report from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that fluorinated drinking water led to a 2 to 5 point IQ drop in children. Does that comport with what you know about fluoride?
Oh, absolutely. And even the AP headline you read there, one of the points I want to make today is if you read that headline carefully, they couch it in these sort of caveated terms by saying twice the recommended limit. This is something that we've seen with this, not only with this lawsuit, with this, the entire history of fluoride research, is that the U.S. government, particularly the EPA and then the CDC, and then lobbying groups like the American Dental Association, refuse to accept that at the currently allowed limits, which is 0.7 milligrams per liter of fluoride in the water, there is harms to humans and especially to children and their developing brains. So you'll see in the headline, they say at twice the recommended limits. It's because they want to send the signal that, yes, we have to acknowledge there's harm from fluoride, but don't worry, it's not going to impact you because it's not at the current limits. But as I'll talk about today, that is completely incorrect. And this is just one more piece of evidence that we have, those of us who've been following this for years now, to show that fluoride is causing harm, and it's causing harm to the most vulnerable among us, that being children, young children, as well as pregnant mothers and their yet to be born babies.
How bad is fluoride, and what is fluoride?
So what we commonly call fluoride is actually a number of different substances, most commonly hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is a byproduct of phosphate mining. Now, there is a company that's in the United States, one of the most well-known companies. They're called Mosaic Company, Mosaic Co. They're based in Florida, and they do aluminum mining. And a byproduct of that aluminum mining is this substance, hydrofluorosilicic acid, which since the 1940s, we've been told is great for remineralizing our teeth and fighting cavities, all of which has been debunked since then. And they started adding this fluoride to the water all around the United States since that point, starting with Grand Rapids, Michigan, and now in the United States and parts of Western Europe and even Canada are now considering it. Nearly every major city in the so-called modern world is doing this. But as the data shows, and as I learned through going to the trial in San Francisco and interviewing the experts, we've known for almost 100 years now that the data has been out there showing the various harms associated with fluoride. This National Toxicology Program final report here is focused on IQ and neurological issues, but that is unfortunately not where the problems with fluoride end. We could talk about bone problems, we can talk about kidney issues, liver issues, and of course there's the calcification of the pineal gland. There's a number of different problems, but this particular report is focused on the damage to our brain, which is obviously something very important.
So the idea that 100 years ago we knew that this was bad, it was this byproduct, an offshoot of the mining, of this aluminum mining. Was it used as a way to, instead of dumping it illegally, oh, we're just going to use it in our drinking water and therefore it's safe for all of you? I mean, is that a way around
absolutely
the pollution?
Absolutely. So in a typical circumstance, these aluminum companies like Mosaic and others, and some of the fluoride has come from China and mining over there, they would have to figure out a way to dispose of this in some sort of environmental safe way. But instead, since the fluoride program, which by the way, the CDC still claims is one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century, they are able to instead profit from this waste. So instead of having to spend money to find a way to safely dispose of the fluoride, the hydrofluorosilicic acid, they get to go to major cities like where I'm originally from in Houston, where the city of Houston has had a contract with companies like that for years for $1 million a year, $1 million a year of taxpayer money going specifically to put this poison in the water. So the companies profit to the tune of hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, instead of having to spend their own money to properly dispose of it.
Wow. And then, of course, now it's in the drinking water. And then when you look at this lawsuit that you've been dealing with and covering, what is the argument from the Fluoride Action Network against the EPA? What has been the crux?
To file petitions with the EPA if we believe that we have data and evidence that proves that a substance or a chemical is toxic. So the Fluoride Action Network, which has been a long-time advocate for protecting people from fluoride, I think since 2004, they got to work. They filed a petition providing numerous data showing all the various harms associated with fluoride, and the EPA, of course, denied that petition. then the Fluoride Action Network filed lawsuit against them. And so that has been dragging on now for we're looking at almost a decade now, 8 years going on. And their argument is essentially that the data is out there. There's plenty of evidence, as this new report is showing as well, to conclude that fluoride is indeed a toxin. It has numerous harms to human health, as we've talked about, developing health and going into adulthood. And that's essentially what they're arguing and what they had to prove in court. And having attended both phases of the trial, first via Zoom during COVID lockdowns, and then again earlier this year in the San Francisco courtroom, they have gone above and beyond, proving that, I would say, beyond a shadow of a doubt. It is now still in the hands of Judge Chen, the federal judge in San Francisco, and he heard from the EPA, heard from all their expert witnesses, and he heard from numerous expert witnesses from the Fluoride Action Network, including some of the leading experts on mercury poisoning, on lead poisoning, and is basically asking the U.S. government and the EPA to apply the same standards that they applied to lead and to mercury, apply those same standards to fluoride, and so far they have refused to do so. And the EPA, although I will acknowledge that there was a historic moment at the trial where the EPA did acknowledge that yes, fluoride is a neurotoxin, the main crux of the debate or the disagreement is at what levels that harm actually begins.
We know it's a neurotoxin. Yes, we will admit it. Just depends on how much you get. I mean, what can families do about this? I mean, our family, we've got 3 kids, Natalie and I, and, we make sure, so we got that like Hello toothpaste, it has no fluoride in it. This is not a sponsor of the show or anything like that. I know there's all sorts of brands out there now that have no fluoride in it. That's one thing I guess you could do. But as far as the drinking water, what are Americans supposed to do? Are they aware how much fluoride is in their water? Do they know? Are American families notified how much of this neurotoxin is in their drinking water?
I don't think the average American, to try to be kind to everybody, I don't think the average American's paying attention. I know people who still drink out of the tap, and I would say immediately that's one thing you should stop doing. Anybody who's listening to this, stop cooking your food with the tap water, stop drinking the tap water, stop making your coffee with the tap water. Because, for example, if you want to make some pasta and you put tap water in there that is fluoridated, because of the fluoride being a salt, it will actually increase. It doesn't evaporate as you boil the water away. It increases into your food, so you concentrate it in your food. So then you're going to be absorbing that. And this is another important point with the NTP report. Now, I mentioned earlier how the Associated Press and other corporate media, they're trying to, they're reporting on this, but they're adding the caveat, but they only looked at limits way beyond the currently allowable amounts in the United States. But that is actually inaccurate, because there's not just one single source of fluoride. Yes, you get it from the drinking water, but you can also, as you mentioned, get it from the toothpaste. The other thing is when you're showering, you're going to be absorbing that fluoride into your skin. And then if you are eating processed food, canned goods, etc., unless it specifically says it's reverse osmosis filtered water, more than likely those canned goods are using fluoridated water. All processed foods contain fluoridated water. So there are numerous sources that people are being exposed to this, not just children, not just pregnant mothers, but all people. So one of the best things you can do is to get a reverse osmosis filter. And I'm not talking about just a standard kind of pitcher filter you might buy from Walmart or something. Most of those really don't do anything. I mean, they'll remove some things, but they're not going to get fluoride out. Reverse osmosis is the only process that is strong enough to actually remove fluoride out of the water. And then, people do need to remineralize their water because it's so strong it takes out maybe some of the good minerals you want as well. But you can do things like that. I mean, companies do sell shower filters. You can buy, if you can afford it, you can buy whole house systems where you can install it actually under the sink, and so the water that comes out is filtered. But I understand that's probably out of the range of many people. One of the things that I've seen in traveling all around the United States is that nearly every state and every city has these water filtration stations. You'll see them as you drive around. There's the Penguin, there's the Windmill, there's a few different brands of them. And those tend to do about 7 to 8 different types of filtration, including reverse osmosis. So like in our home, we go out and fill up 4 or 5-gallon jugs and bring them home. And then that's what we drink with. That's what we cook with. We have a shower filter here at our house as well. There are steps, thankfully, that we can take to protect ourselves. But of course, some of us would like to believe that the government is supposed to protect us, and why are they not taking these steps? Hopefully that will change now that this this final report from the National Toxicology Program is out, hopefully we will be getting a ruling from Judge Chen. And if he does rule in favor of the Fluoride Action Network, although it will still take some more bureaucracy and a little bit of time to get it done, it would be the end of water fluoridation.
Wonderful. I think that's the solution, because these reverse osmosis systems are very expensive, and Americans are really strapped right now. So you're going to ask them to put in, I'm saying the government needs to step in here, because you're going to ask every American to do a $2,000 to $3,000 reverse osmosis system in their house, and it's just not viable for so many Americans right now. We need the federal government to step in and remove this from our water. So, Derek, thank you for your amazing reporting on all of this. Where can people find you online and your reporting?
Absolutely. Clayton, I'd like to add one more brief point if I can, because I just want to hammer home how important this report is. I just want to mention that the NTP's report, this final report that we're finally seeing, this has been kept secret for the last 2 years at least. The only reason we ever even knew about this report is because of this lawsuit. And through the fluoride lawsuit, we were able to get emails which show that the current Assistant Secretary of Health, Rachel Levine, or Richard Levine, depending on your preference, directly blocked the release of this report more than a year ago, more than 2 years ago. And because of the emails that have come out through this court case here, we actually were able to get a view into the background, where we saw conversations between the peer reviewers and we saw conversations between the scientists. And I just want to make this point clear that the NTP scientists, well before this final report has come out, they have been fighting to get the truth out. They have been fighting to maintain their conclusions. Every time these anonymous peer reviewers from the government would try to come in and say, we think you need to change the language here, we need to do this thing, the scientists continuously come back and said that, we believe in our assessment. In fact, I'll just quote them. They said, quote, "It is true that our stated confidence assessment is based primarily on studies with total exposures higher than those generally associated with consumption of optimally fluoridated water in the United States. However, the confidence assessment also included findings from studies with fluoride exposures that are similar to or even lower than the optimally fluoridated water supplies in the United States." So I just want to make that clear, that there are NTP scientists who are not famous or well known, but they have been fighting for the last few years to make sure that this report came out. And it's only because of Rachel Levine and other special interests, including the ADA, that it's taken this long for this to come out. So I want people to understand that there are some good scientists within there trying to keep the data alive, and they've been fighting to get their conclusions out. And if anybody wants to find more about my work, I'm at theconsciousresistance.com. We have an entire section of our website called Water Fluoridation. You can find all my reporting, all of my interviews with the expert witnesses from this trial. And you can also find my written articles over at thelastamericanvagabond.com. We similarly have a whole section dedicated to the fluoride trial and all of the articles I've written on this for the last 4 or 5 years. And you can find me on Twitter at dbrosLiveFree. And I appreciate you having me back on.
My pleasure. And wow, I didn't know that about Rachel Levine. So the Biden administration trying to hide this from the American people. Very interesting. Derek, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. Thank you, Derek.
And yes, you did know that about Rachel Levine. I covered that.
I know. I forgot about that piece of it. But the fact that they knew this information. They kept it from the American people. And the only reason we're learning about it is because of the lawsuit. Yeah. Right?
Exactly.
So you're
right.
hiding this information from the American people, and these children are drinking a neurotoxin every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's crazy. And, I see some of these comments in the chat saying, is he being paid for this? Are you guys selling water filters? No, we're not. The reason he's
That's
one
a great idea, though.
I know. It's not that we wouldn't if we had a good sponsor that wants to sponsor the show, because now we know this collectively. We know it despite the U.S. government trying to hide it from us. I mean, they're fighting this the same way they fought against acknowledging that Agent Orange was a neurotoxin. They fought like hell to not acknowledge that for Vietnam veterans. So the reason that Derek Broze is one of our favorite guests here on Redacted is because he brings the receipts, because he's a studier, and that's what we value here at Redacted, because we're Poindexters. So no, we did not pay him for that. He just does a lot of homework and shares it with us, and we thank him for that very much.
Yeah, I like someone said in our Rip Surfer over on Rumble says the Redacted reverse osmosis system. Well, I mean, they cost like $3,000. I think like Culligan or whatever. And I saw someone in the chat saying on YouTube saying there's like an off-brand one you can get for like $300. $100. I don't know. Anyway,
you got to study it for yourself. Yeah, definitely. Even if we did have a sponsor here on this show, we would want you to study it for yourself to see if it works for you. But this stuff's hard. It's hard to work around because the U.S. government is putting it on us.
I said that I was scared though about the cooking a pasta or something like that. It's like getting the water out of the tap just for that, because you kind of we do that. We do like the drinking water out of the canister thing. We get the 5-gallon jugs, but I'm going to do more research into that, because I'm like, the 5-gallon jugs that we get,
we don't know,
and I'm going to
most of the, a lot of the water companies, like you get bottled water and stuff like that, it comes right out of the tap. They're not like there was that big scandal sourcing it out of a spring.
There was a big scandal about that in Philadelphia. Yeah, they were selling like bottled water, and it was like coming right out of the tap. It was just like, okay, that's so crazy. Anyway, stay vigilant, everyone. We got more news to get to here on the show. We're going to talk about Canada going after people who make social media posts. Yes, the tyrannical Trudeau government is going to talk about that. And Jack Brzezilek has a brand new book out on communism, and we are marching towards communism. So we're going to talk to Jack specifically today about communism and how the United States is slipping towards that in a very, very quickly. But first,
we'd like to tell you about our friends over at Ramp, because if you want a better way to simplify finance operations for your business, vendor payments, and accounting, then Ramp could be a game changer. They are the corporate card and spend management software designed to help save you time and money, putting money back in your pocket. They give finance teams unprecedented control and insight into company spend. With Ramp, you're able to issue cards to every employee with limits and restrictions, and automate expense reporting so you can stop wasting time at the end of the month. In fact, my dad has a company and recently found out that somebody who had a company card was using it for personal expenses and then just paying it back. And he said, why wasn't this flagged to me? How come I didn't know? Well, he is then going to look into Ramp to make sure that he doesn't miss things like that anymore. Ramp saves you money. Businesses, in fact, that use Ramp save an average of 5% per year. Plus, it's easy to use. You can get started, issue virtual and physical cards, and start making payments in less than 15 minutes, whether you have 5 employees or 5,000. So check them out right now. You can get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/redacted. One more time, that's ramp.com/redacted. That's ramp.com/redacted. Cards are issued by Sutton Bank, members of the FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. One more time, that's ramp.com/redacted.
Well, stop me if you've heard this before. Government's cracking down on social media posts and making arrests. Well, yes, we've heard about it happening, of course, in the UK and parts of Europe. And now it is coming to Canada, where we're seeing the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arresting social media users for discriminatory and racially offensive posts. Yes, Canada now will arrest you over your social media posts. Let's dive more deeply into the tyranny that is Trudeau's government up there in Canada with David Craden, journalist, independent journalist who writes at the Post-Millennial and who has the great YouTube channel as well, Craden's Right. David, so it's come to Canada now. I guess we were predicting this for a while, right?
As you know, Clayton, the Online Harms Act is being voted on perhaps next year. And this is the horrible censorship law that contains the thought crimes component. But it's not law yet. So why are the RCMP showing up at a woman's door in Chilliwack and saying, hey, we're going to arrest you for racially offensive tweets or racially offensive posts or racially offensive anything on the internet? Because this happened exactly at the same time as these so-called keyboard warriors, as these idiot judges are calling them in the UK. I mean, they're arresting people in the UK for saying things contrary to government policy, and the cops are literally showing up in their bedrooms, in their living rooms, carting them away to jail. You've seen the video of this. You've shown the video of this on Redacted. It's shocking. I mean, people in their 60s and 70s being arrested for these so-called Facebook crimes, and these cops coming around and just carting them off to jail. And it's happening now in Canada. We haven't even got the Online Harms Act passed yet. And this is absolutely frightening because what's happening in UK is no longer a parliamentary democracy. It's a dictatorship. It's a totalitarian society envisioned by George Orwell, because you have to remember 1984 takes place in a futuristic society in Great Britain. It's become that society now. And my God, it's coming to Canada now. I don't want the RCMP coming to my door and giving their opinion on anything, especially about what I'm putting on the internet. And a lot of people are saying, enough is enough of this. And they haven't even got the law behind them.
Right. So they don't even have the law behind them. Then what's the impetus here? Like what does she say that's so offensive that rises to some level? We don't even have a law behind it. They're just taking it upon themselves to show. We've seen the video in the United States, the FBI doing the same thing in the United States, people making social media posts on Facebook and the FBI showing up and knocking on people's door. And people are saying, get out of my yard, get off my lawn right now. You're here. We literally have the largest child trafficking operation in the world. And you're worried about my Facebook posts?
Yeah, well, that's it. This woman actually isn't the nicest example of a free speech advocate. I'm not here to justify anything she said. Some of it is a little bit offensive, but free speech can be offensive. And I don't want the cops judging what's...
Hold on. Let's make the point here. The reason we have free speech is for the speech that you don't like, right? That is what is protected, protected speech. It's the speech you don't like. And so we always have to remember that. Like things are offensive. People are going to be offended, but it should be protected, at least in the United States. That's why we have the First Amendment.
Well, we have a Charter of Rights, too, in Canada, which should be protecting our free speech. That, of course, is a huge gap in the United Kingdom. They don't have a Charter of Rights or a Bill of Rights or even a Constitution. They have nothing to go back on except protocol and the fair play of Parliament. So that's why they're getting away with murder in the UK. But my God, it should not be happening in countries where they have a constitution and Charter of Rights. But it is happening here. And of course, the anti-free speech advocates will always go after the weakest link first, the most obnoxious, the most critical,
offensive.
They will do that first and then start going after you and I, because once they have gone after the weakest link, then they think it's open season on everybody else. They're just trying here to set precedents, is all this is about, so they can then start arresting other people. And this is absolutely out of line, completely out of line.
So this is one situation where you have this woman. Are there other situations right now where there's been reports? Because it seems like these sort of have trickled out a little bit. They weren't like immediately aware that these were happening, these RCMP arrests and showing up at people's doors. Do we have other situations right now that have also been happening across Canada?
I'm not aware of any others. There was tremendous pushback when the story came out, and it was well reported, not just by new media or independent media, but the mainstream media picked this up as well. But what's most disturbing about this case is that this woman was picked up because her neighbors turned her in to the cops, and the local media reported her to the cops. So whose side are they on? And this is, to me, an incredible indication that if we get the Online Harms Act passed in Canada, is the national media going to be turning in other journalists because they don't like what they're writing? This is a very, very sad and very dangerous precedent. But I guess I'm not surprised.
No, and we've seen this. I mean, there's been this encouragement of this sort of snitching on your neighbor, right? And this is we've seen this in Ukraine, of course, and what Zelensky and the Dia app that has been rolled out across Ukraine basically encourages you to snitch on your neighbor. So is that part of like this plan from the Trudeau government? Is like sort of snitching on your neighbor? If you see something offensive on social media, please report your neighbor so the RCMP can show up at their door?
Well, that's exactly what is going to happen with the thought crimes component of the Online Harms Act. It's based on testimony from people around your house who suspect you're up to no good, who are monitoring what you're doing on the internet and might wage a complaint with the police, with this new Online Harms Act censorship board, or with a human rights tribunal. So you've got three different organizations coming after you, but it's based on the same principle that Tim Waltz loves so much in Minnesota, by the way, which is set up a snitch line. So you've got people turning in other people down the street. It sounds positively communistic. And that's what it is. That's what it is.
Well, speaking of communistic, it's the crackdown on the Freedom Convoy and the Freedom Convoy truckers. You've been, of course, been following the trial there for over a year now. And there's a big update today. Can you give us an update today before we let you go, David?
Yes. Tomorrow, Friday, is the final day of testimony for the Freedom Convoy trial of Tamara Leach and Chris Barber. I have been there 95% of these hearings. We're on day 44 for a mischief trial. And I've been told by a very good source that the legal bill for Tamara and Chris is now approaching $1 million. It's the longest mischief trial in Canadian and possibly world history. I am going to find out how much the prosecution, the Crown, has spent. We know it's at least $2 or $3 million in prosecuting these people in a mischief trial. And I tell you, if these two are not found innocent, when we finally get a verdict in 2025, believe it or not, we're going to wait till January, February at the earliest for a verdict on this. If they are found guilty, all Canadians who love free speech, all Canadians who yearn for freedom will also be found guilty by this court. This is a profound moment, a seminal moment in Canadian and world history. The Freedom Convoy, these truckers stood up for your freedom and mine during the COVID mandates, and I'm with them today standing up for theirs.
Hallelujah. And I think our audience is as well. Well, thank you for that, David. And we'll be watching tomorrow, of course, what happens there. And then we're waiting for a decision from that court over the next few months. David Creighton, always great to see you up there in Canada. Thanks, as always, for keeping them honest.
Thank you so much, Clayton. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. All right. Well, we've got more news to get to here on your Thursday, and we're going to talk about communism and how it's on the march. Tonight, of course, Kamala Harris is going to be rolling out her plan for the future of America and what that looks like. Of course, trillions of dollars in new spending, going after people who play golf. That's the new, you tax people who play golf now. Mm-hmm. Like that's how you're going to really.
Unrealized gains. And that's the thing that bothers me so much is we're going to tax unrealized gains. Well, what if the value of my assets has plummeted because of what you did? Do I get a tax credit? No.
That's a great point. Right. That. So if your gold goes up, in a particular year, they're going to then tax your unrealized gains, even though you haven't cashed it out or sold it. So it's actually phony money. It's on paper, but you actually haven't made the money.
Right.
It hasn't gone into your bank account. It's like it went up in value. So now you're going to tax that. And then what happens if it goes down? Will we get a credit back from you because you've screwed us over?
I don't think that's how it works because they do nothing in our favor at all. It's the beast that's the government.
So what is communism? I mean, what we're moving towards is communism.
Right, socially and economically. Now, President Trump has continued to use this as a tagline around Kamala Harris, and liberal bloggers and voices are saying that's not going to stick. That's just a Trump talking point, which says to me they're not willing to look at the substance and see, well, are we actually moving in a communist direction? Because there are a lot of proof points that show that is the case. Jack Posobiec has written a book about it called Unhumans, and he's going to talk to us about that coming up.
First, just a real-time follow-up here, because we talked about the fluoride story. People are asking, do Berkey water filters get rid of the fluoride out of the water? And I looked it up on Berkey's website, and it says 97%. According to their reporting from Berkey. We love our Berkey. We have one of those. Yeah. And so 97%, according to Berkey, on that. And other people are following up on the Thomas Crooks stuff, saying, I just want to make a point here. They're telling us he's the shooter, right? And now we're learning that clearly that probably wasn't the case. There's more to this, and maybe he was acting with more than one person, or he wasn't acting at all, and he was alone totally. And or he wasn't involved in this at all. That's the other part of this, that he was a total patsy. And I think from the very beginning, we've said it seems very, very fishy that this guy's allowed to walk around in broad daylight. Like, look at me. I've got a ladder. I've got a gun. I'm going to gun ranges. I'm all over the place. I'm in these particular locations. Likely, maybe he had nothing at all to do with the shooting. And there was, bullets fired from near his location or whatever. So That's probably why they wanted to burn his body so quickly. Like, if you want to put two and two together and wonder why they wanted to cremate his body so quickly.
Right. At this point, there are just too many questions. And we're just
and the thing is, like, they, even if, like, let's say, for the sake of argument, it happened exactly like the media has portrayed it. Like, let's say that's exactly what happened. If they would stop sneaking around, it wouldn't look so damn suspicious. But it's like when you've got, like, if that's what happened, why are they being so damn obfuscating then? Like, it's just, that's frustrating to me.
It's a cover-up. You've hidden this information. You won't release the documents. You burn his body ahead of time. So all of it paints and smells of a cover-up. Exactly. So anyway, that's...
Something Jack Posobiec has been doing is he is at the Democratic convention, and he's been going around and asking Democrats and liberals, do you feel bad about the Trump assassination? Do you condemn it? How do you feel about it? So hopefully he'll tell us about it, because he's been posting about that on X, and a lot of them do not. They do not find this interesting. They do not care. They do not lament it. So hopefully he's going to tell us about that after the break. So we're going to get to that. But first,
cybercrime has become the third largest economy in the world, trailing in size only to the United States and China right now. Cyber criminals target people, businesses, by exploiting vulnerabilities in the everyday tools like we use, like email, social media messengers, free cloud storage, weak passwords. When you get a text message and someone sends a link, don't click that link, for crying out loud. And if you, oh my God, I see these emails all the time. I get something from, like, Apple or whatever that's like, hey, you've been charged for this app in the App Store. And it's like, do you want to contest? No, don't click that link. Never, ever, ever do that. In fact, this month, AT&T announced that hackers compromised all of their customers' text and call records, which exposes us to even more threats. And that's where the people at Bunkr Life come in, because they are protecting we, the people. Bunkr is an affordable, all-in-one app protecting you against identity theft, cybercrime, and surveillance. Bunkr includes patent-pending secure messaging, easy-to-use password management, secure cloud storage. Why pay for several different applications when you can protect yourself with Bunkr for just $12 annually? Bunkr is owned and operated by security professionals with a long history of protecting the public against cyber criminals and surveillance. So you can download it right now and get a year for free, a whole year for free. Just go to Bunkr, that's BUNKR.life today. Download the app for free. Use the code Redacted, and you get a free year on us by using our code Redacted. Again, Bunkr.life, and use the code Redacted.
Vice President Kamala Harris' campaign promises have been called communist. The media says that's ridiculous. That's just a MAGA Trump talking point. Jack Posobiec is a Navy veteran and a popular conservative voice on X, and his recent book, Unhumans, is a strongly worded warning about the dangers of communism, specifically how it creeps into a society and takes hold of it in a way you don't see coming until it's too late. In fact, he tells how history has reframed certain leaders who fought against communism. I've been wanting to speak to him for a while. He joins us today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Well, I'm really excited to be here. What can I say? I'm a big fan of Redacted. I think they say long time, first time. So I think that's kind of how I feel right now.
Amazing. Okay, hopefully not the last time. So first of all, can you break it down for us? What is the threat of communism, and how do you see it playing out in American politics right now?
Yeah, sure. It's actually really simple, Natalie. So basically, communism is the weaponization of greed and the weaponization of hatred for and envy, specifically envy and greed. So the idea is that there's always going to be times in society where there are people who say, there are those who have more than me, and I wish that I had more. And certainly this is something that's endemic to human nature, and it cuts across all societies, it cuts across all cultures. It's always something that is part of humanity. And you can take that in a philosophical route, you can take that a religious route, but a lot of people agree that these feelings do exist, and I think they inherently do. And so the danger of using this for weaponization in politics is when people come in and say, if you want these things, then you can get up and take them. You can get up and take them from those who have more than you. You can get up and take them from those who not earn them, by the way. Earn is completely different. This is vindictive. This is angry. This is petty. It is grievance-based primarily, and it is always, always, always based on tearing down those who, for lack of a better term, have built things in the world, have accomplished things in the world, have gone out and done things in the world. And so when you get leaders who tap into this vein in the human psyche and then turn it against others in society, we've seen throughout history the absolute horrors that have come from it. It always ends in mass graves. It ends in piles of skulls. It ends in severe economic destruction. And oh, by the way, for the have-nots that they claim to be helping, they're typically ending up in a worse position than they were even under whatever the previous system was. And so when we see the dangers inherent in when people engage in these types of politics for short-term political gain, we can already see this happening throughout the West and now more and more increasingly in the United States.
So the way it's playing out in Kamala Harris's proposals for the economy is very much strengthen the government, give the government all the power to decide what you buy, who buys what, make sure that the wealthiest are regulated but it's a ruse, right? Because it will make some people very powerful and wealthy, and it will make the rest of us dependent on the government. But it's being sold under this bill of goods as equality. Now, you point out how this played out for the Bolsheviks. Can you just sort of give us that cautionary tale and how you see this economically being sold under this faux empowerment?
Oh, sure. So now the Bolsheviks, so typically when we break down in the book in Unhumans that we basically put it down this way. The communism is a tactic. It is not an ideology. It's not a philosophy the way people understand it. It's actually a tactic to rabble rouse and then to use that rabble to throw against whatever the existing order of a country or society is, to destabilize it and then erect new powers, new controllers, new players to take over whatever that government is. And it typically plays out in two stages. One is what we call OPE, or operational preparation of the environment, and then the next stage is the actual revolution of it itself. We're actually now in the revolution stage. So the operational preparation of the environment, and as a prior military intelligence officer, that this is something that we would learn is basically the idea of conducting operations prior to your actual operation. So basic changing the environment, changing systems, shaping the field of battle for your needs and for your interests, so that when you do commit to action, that you will be in a favorable position to do so. And so when we talk about that, what we see first, if we break it down into three stages, the first is the separation, second is the messaging, and third is infiltration. So separation. Who are the targets for our revolution going to be? So we pick our targets, we go throughout a society and we say, okay, it's going to be the people who and typically, by the way, when we see with the left or the regime politics in the collective West right now, it's not usually economic. And so typically when I give these interviews, we've been talking more about cultural Marxism, because that's been the watchword of the new types of Marxism. However, in the last week or so, Kamala Harris directly through her campaign has dipped back into even the classical economic communism, yes, because she's adding on to it. So some of the groups that have been targeted, obviously religious groups, Christians, white males in general, anyone who is, a less than subservient man, people who have money, people who are engaged in crypto, people who are walking outside of the mainstream financial institutions and the financial system, and of course anyone who stands against the goals of the globalist collective West are then targeted, or you're smeared as someone who is a traitor to your country and things like this because you stand against the globalist agenda. And so now,
but it's clever though. I just want to add this because I think the way that it's so cleverly spun is that it's spun as the patriarchy. It's only good for this certain amount of people. And actually, I didn't understand how I was rooting against capitalism until I read Carol Roth's book about the pandemic, when I thought, wait a minute, she's totally right. I see these onesies at Target talking about down with the patriarchy. What that is a reframing of communism in an empowering way, when you have to look at it and say, but I benefit from capitalism. My whole family, my whole life does. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I got excited about that.
It's a perfect example, because one of the issues that they've had in applying communism to the West is that really the free market system has been very successful. The Soviet Union fell in the early 1990s, so like 91, 92. So the free market system has been pushed across the globe, and even the Chinese Communist Party have adopted, by and large, many elements of the market economy. Just obviously none of the political openness of the West. And so what we've seen is a change in communism, moving away from the classical Marxist model of economics, but using the same tactic as always that you just described. And what I'm saying, you're dividing the country into the oppressor versus oppressed model. So there must always be an oppressor. So the oppressor must be systemic racism, the patriarchy, the Catholic Church, whatever authority figure group you need to rail against. And then you go to your oppressed class. And your oppressed class, you go to them and say, look at these people, they're oppressing you. Follow me and I will lead you against them. Now, in the case of the Soviet Russia, which you mentioned, of course, the obvious target was the Romanov family and the Russian Empire and the dynasty. And what they'll do, and people always ask me this, to say, well, weren't there actual grievances? Wasn't there the system of serfdom in Russia? It's like, yes, there was actually. There were legitimate grievances. And so this becomes a flashpoint for the Bolsheviks and for Lenin. So when Lenin comes up, he isn't talking about, patriarchy and equity and systemic racism and these things, but what does he say? He says peace, land, bread. So this is the messaging phase that I was talking about. So the message then becomes peace, land, bread. If you join with me, we will get peace, land, bread. And then what does he do? He infiltrates all throughout Russian society. And he's funded by the Germans, by the way, total German agent, which is why peace, by the way, is a huge plank of theirs, because Russia at the time was in a war with Germany that we call World War I. And it had been going much better than the communists would say, but that's one of the things that Germany realized. Instead of fighting a two-front war, they said, well, why don't we just destabilize Russia and fund all these radicals and get them to start a civil war within Russia, and then we can knock them out. So it was a regime change operation, by the way, from the Germans, the same type of regime change operations we see always run by the collective West, that actually unleashed radicals taking over a country and then sending that country down a perpetual spiral that we know as the Soviet Union, where we saw mass slaughter of essentially what are the kulaks. And so the kulaks became the target after the Romanovs. And so the Romanov family, everybody knows, I think, but it bears saying, and of course we talk about this in Humans, the entire family was slaughtered. The women, the children of the Romanovs were stabbed, they were bayoneted, they were shot in the head. Even little Prince Alexei, the youngest member of the family, in a basement out in the woods where they dragged them to. And so there was no prison. It was mass slaughter and killing. And then once they ran out of Romanovs, they needed a new group to rail against, because again, to keep in power, they always have to have a group that they're calling the oppressors. And so they moved it down a rung, and communism never stays at just the 1%. Then it moves to, we think the kulaks are the ones who are actually the oppressors in society now, because we still haven't achieved our utopia. And what's a kulak? Well, for lack of a better term, a kulak might be what we call today a small business owner, someone who has a second house, someone who has an Airbnb.
The middle class.
The middle class, someone who has maybe you have a home that you rent, something that, those people, I don't think by anyone's terms would be considered rich. They wouldn't be considered the 1%. You wouldn't be considered, someone who's like fantastically wealthy or anything like this. But of course, you would be targeted because, well, you're a landowner and no one is allowed to own land and no one is allowed to own property. And you're exploiting your tenants and you're exploiting those who are subject to your whims. And so then they get targeted next. And anyone who rails against this, anyone who goes against the confiscation of their property, anyone who goes against or speaks out against the political commissars running throughout society, well, guess what? You get sent to something called the gulags. And we've already seen this, by the way, with the squatters situation in New York City here today. This is classic communist play to say that someone who is not does not have a contract with you can enter your property and then gain rights to your home, a home that you own, if you are not evicting them. But then the government will come in and say that if you haven't evicted them for 30 days, then it becomes theirs and you have no right to evict them. This is a classic communist play again. So they're taking people who are that they describe as the have-nots and empowering them and weaponizing them against anyone who's got a little bit of money, anyone who's got, again, who's attained that middle-class household. And by the way, the word bourgeoisie, if you look it up in the original French, we tend to say bougie and we use it as slang to sort of mean like something that's very, very high end today. But if you actually look up the original word of bourgeoisie, because remember, France back then, and we call this a proto-communist revolution in the book, France had the aristocracy. So aristocracy already was a word and a class that the French knew. The bourgeoisie was not the aristocracy. The bourgeoisie meant the middle class. That's what the word actually uses. That's the word actually means in French.
So it was an attack on the middle class. Now, we don't have enough time to talk about these, but I want to let people know that when you read this book, you are forced to ask yourself, okay, wait, is that person history told me was the bad guy? What do I actually know about that for myself? So some of the people you take on, Marie Antoinette, Senator McCarthy, General Franco, Augusto Pinochet, and I found myself kind of reeling because you say they were anti-communist leaders that history has then denigrated, and you try to retell those stories, and it felt like, oh my gosh, you just ripped the rug right from under me, and I didn't know those things. Now, I myself, having lived in Portugal, had the same experience studying Salazar when I read all of these books about him, and I thought, wait, when does he get bad? What did he do to be canceled from history? It's very interesting, and I found myself thinking, where do I go to?
You're very close to including Salazar in the book.
Oh, okay. I could talk a blue streak about Salazar. We won't do that right now. And one of your quotes from General Franco is, "Wherever I am, there will be no communism," and that has become a bit of a manifesto throughout the book. One of the things I really want to ask you, though, is that watching the DNC this week, I think to myself, do those people know what they're championing for? For instance, watching Obama speak, I think, don't they know he murdered people in Libya and Syria?
I was there. I was in the room. I was in the room when Obama and Michelle were speaking. Right.
And so I'm just kind of thinking, watching these people, do you think they're just well-intentioned and not studying for the rights that they are championing to be taken from them? Is that your take on that?
So I think that there's an interesting clip that I saw earlier today where I think it was during one of the these roll calls that they're doing, and they're doing these roll calls of the different states. And there was a delegate who got up, and her name is Olivia Juliana. And one of the things that she stated during this roll call from the floor of the DNC was, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And that to me is a full-on depiction of exactly what I've been saying, that they claim that their movement is rooted in peace and justice and equality and righting the wrongs of history and righting the wrongs of society, and they're the crusaders. But she's essentially letting the cat out of the bag, that what it is they do, when they say eat the rich, they really mean that. And when they say rich, they're talking about people like you, people like the middle class. They're they're defining it in a way that I don't think any of us would define it. And when they say eat, they actually do mean tear down, destroy, imprison, and in some cases, or they would not mind if people lost their lives. And as we've seen throughout history, people will lose their lives if we go down this road. And so do I think that everyone there has these beliefs? Not necessarily, but I do think, though, one of the sort of social experiments that I did while I was there was I was walking around trying to see if I could get anyone to denounce the assassination attempt on President Trump. So he's obviously someone who's been targeted by them. I think he's mentioned more than any other policy at the DNC that Trump is you're hearing more about Trump. I think I heard more about Trump at the DNC than I did at the RNC. And I was walking around for almost an hour, and I could only find one person who said that he denounced it. Every single other person would hear me and then just walk away when I brought it up. Well, you guys are against political violence, right? You talk about J6, you talk about Charlottesville, you talk about all these things. You're against political violence, right? And so they, at the core, and this is something people have to understand, is they view anyone who's not on board with them as standing in the way of their goals, standing in the way of their movement, standing in the way of the revolution, standing in the way of their utopia. And in Mao's China, in the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and I lived in China for several years, I speak Mandarin, and when you see those signs that were depicted under the necks and the heads of the individuals were put on struggle session in these giant arenas or soccer stadiums, and the crimes that are listed under them typically will say something like right-wing extremist or anti-revolutionary extremist. So the enemies of the revolution are always smeared as extremists, are always smeared as purveyors of disinformation. And this is a communist tactic that has been used for over a century. And so what we're trying to do in the book is explain that these types of tactics have been used before. We are now seeing them being unleashed right now in real time, and give people a playbook to understand what's going on, and then also sort of a counter playbook to fight back.
Right. And so some liberal voices, including a piece in the Washington Post this week, say, well, Trump is accusing Kamala Harris of having communist policies, but this is not the flex that he thinks it is, because people are not concerned about it and they don't understand. So what you're pointing out is the thread that runs through communist societies that we are championing. So I want to thank you for coming on Redacted. And yeah, I'm going to suggest that people read this book, because not only do you have these cultural warnings, but also the end of the book has suggestions on how you can fight this in your own society, how you can champion this in wherever you live. So you can follow Jack on X. It's Jack, let's see, here it is, at Jack Poso, right? No. What is your Twitter? Yes, sorry.
Yeah, so Jack Posobiec or Jack Poso. Just go on next. Look up Poso. You'll find me.
You're gonna find him. Yeah, you're popular on that platform, so that's why I was so excited.
By the way, if you can't find me, just go over to Media Matters and the SPLC and any far left blog and their Right Wing Watch, and they're constantly talking about me. I think they've actually done more, and even the former Biden campaign did more to promote my book than even conservative media did. So I want to thank them for getting us on the New York Times bestseller list.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, I hope you come back on Redacted another time.
I'd love to. Thanks so much, Natalie.
That's going to do it for us at Redacted this week. Phew, we got through it. 2 political conventions. Now it's time to turn the heat on for the rest of the presidential election. Are you warmed up? Take your multivitamin. I hope you're staying hydrated. Also, hey, if you'd like some merch to wear around and you don't want to wear something from either of the political parties, you can look at the Redacted store. It tells everybody that, hey, you're not a conspiracy theorist. You're a conspiracy knower. You see beyond the propaganda. That's one of my favorite shirts we've got, plus the non-pacifist peace extremist and so much more. You can signal to the world that you like Redacted and help other people red pill themselves. So please visit the Redacted store at redactedstore.com. We'd really appreciate it. And let us know what you like there, what you might be ordering for Christmas, that kind of thing. Again, it's redactedstore.com. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you here next week. Same time, same place. Thanks, everybody.